So, as we are trying to set our context here in the Old Testament, or in the lesson book if you're going to cheat, who did we study last week? Who? Moses, that's right, okay. What's the relationship between Moses and Joshua? Don't say father and son. What's the relationship, Lynn? There you go, successor, that's right. Joshua goes for a while as Moses' assistant. Of course, Moses is going to die. And what are some of the circumstances surrounding Moses' death? Do you remember that? He doesn't get to go into the promised land, right, because of some of the sin he had committed previously. He does get to what? He does get to see it. He gets to climb up on the mountain and see it. He's going to die. And who's going to take over the leadership of Israel in his place? And this is where we come to Joshua. All right, so Moses led Israel for approximately 40 years. Remember, we can divide Moses' life into 3 40-year periods. He leads Israel for that last 40-year period, so he dies around the age of 120. They mourn, the children of Israel do, for 30 days. And then Joshua is going to rise to the scene to lead God's people. Come over with me to the book of Joshua in chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1. Capítulo 1, verso 1. Joshua chapter 1 and verse 1. It came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross this Jordan, you and all the people, to the land which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. All right, so you're going over you're crossing the river. Why? Not a trick question. Okay, we're going to the land that God had promised to give to whom? To the sons of Israel, okay? And this is a promise that tracks back to whom?
Abraham.
Right, goes back to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, right? What is the nature of this promise that was made to Abraham? Okay, ultimately, in your seed, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed, right? The book of Galatians is going to tell us that seed is Christ, okay? Particularly as it relates to Joshua here, what is the promise that connects the people in Joshua 1 to Abraham?
We would have the land from basically Egypt all the way to the Euphrates.
Okay, so I'm giving you a land, I'm giving you a particular segment of land. This is land that had been promised to Abraham. Did Abraham get this land? He did not get this land. Do you remember why? Why did the book of Genesis tell us Abraham did not get this land?
The sins of the Amorite were not full.
The iniquity or the sin of the Amorites was not yet complete. That is, God was not just going to arbitrarily disinherit an entire nation. He would disinherit them if their sin got to a certain point. And he says prophetically to Abraham, in about 4 generations, that's going to happen, and then this land will be for your descendants. But as for you, it's not going to be for you. Notably, Abraham is going to live in the promised land in what does the New Testament tell us?
As a foreigner.
Yeah, in a foreigner. He lived in tents here. Very good. All right. We noted last week that Joshua gets training under Moses. He is the assistant to Moses. Exodus chapter 24 notes that for us. And he is one of only 2 people over the age of 60 who are going to enter the promised land. Now, in our overview, and this is just the nature of doing an overview, we're skipping really from the end of the book of Exodus all the way to the book of Joshua. All right? So we're missing some books in the middle, right? We're missing Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. Some of those books have some biographical elements to them. Some of them don't have a lot of biographical. Some of them are a lot of repetition of law and things like that. We're not skipping over them because they're unimportant. We're just kind of hitting highlights as we go here. So in one of the scenes, rather, that we skip over, is in the book of Numbers. Look at Numbers chapter 13. Números capítulo 13. Numbers chapter 13. Now, if your Bible gives you cheat notes like mine does, what is chapter 13 about? Okay, these are the spies going into the land of Canaan. Do you remember this story? What's happening here? We're spying out the land of Canaan for what purpose? To take it, okay? And the spies go and see it, and you've got a list of the spies starting in verse 4. They send them out, go up, verse 17, go up there into the Negev, then go up into the hill country, see what the land is like and whether the people who live in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many. How is the land in which they live? Is it good or bad? And how are the cities in which they live? Are they like open camps or with fortifications? So the spies are to go up and see all of this. In verse 25, verso 25, the spies return at the end of 40 days, and what is their report? The land is great, but we can't take it. Why can we not take it?
There's giants.
Yeah, the people there are like giants, right? We just don't have the what?
Trust in God.
Yeah, ultimately that's what it's going to be. We don't have the trust in God to do this, right? Which again is astounding, and this is another, if we're keeping tally marks, here's another tally mark of Israel's doubt, right? What has God done for them up to this point? Now, he's taken care of them literally from the time that they were slaves in Egypt all the way till now. He has taken care of them every step of the way. And now suddenly, this is going to be too great? I mean, what had God done for them at the Red Sea? Yeah, he had not only parted the Red Sea, he had parted the Red Sea to such a degree that they went through how? On dry land. It wasn't mushy, it wasn't soggy, it wasn't wet, it was dry. If God was able to do that, why would this pose a problem? And the answer is what? It wouldn't. But we've got this challenge of a lack of faith. So this is the report that is brought back. But look over here at verse 6 of chapter 14. Números capítulo 14, verso 6. Numbers 14 and verse 6. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, of those who had spied out the land, they tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. And it was at that moment the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. Can you imagine that scene? Here are Joshua and Caleb, really the only two of the spies who are seeing things correctly. And as it appears, seemingly some of the only people in the city, in the nation that are seeing things correctly. The response of everyone around Joshua and Caleb is to kill them. And just as they are taking up stones to stone them, what happens? God's glory appears. Something is amiss here, and God's fixing to take care of it. Brother Roach, what did you want to add?
They're going to stone him. Why would they stone him? Well, stoning is for blasphemy. Mm-hmm. It's like they're speaking against God, when it's quite the opposite.
Correct.
It's the other 10 who are speaking against God.
Very good. So, Brother Evans, I'm sorry.
Shows us the danger of majority rule and why we don't vote on things.
Sure.
Looks to me like on the golden calf that most of the people wanted it, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Looks like most of the people were, after the report, against going into the promised land.
Sure.
And so the majority is often wrong, and it's why we don't, in the Lord's church, go by majority.
I think that's an excellent point. And so we come over here to the end of chapter 14. Look at verse 22. Verso 22. Here is the Lord speaking. Surely all the men who have seen my glory and my signs which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not listened to my voice, they shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has had a different spirit and followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall take possession of it. And so Caleb, and as you skip down to verse 30, Caleb and Joshua will be the two Israelites who are over, verse 33, who are over 40 years old, who are going to be able to see the promised land. The rest of the Israelite nation from 40 and older, they're going to die off in what we call the what?
The wandering.
The wandering, the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. Go ahead, Jim.
I've read the names of the spies, and unless he's called by a different name, Joshua is not there. There is a son of Nun, though.
Yes. So you can do a report for us on that and bring that back to us next week, Jim.
Verse 16.
Yeah, verse 16 is going to mention Joshua. He seems to be one that Moses is going to be able to insert in there by his own. I say by his own, I don't necessarily mean it like that. Here is somebody that Moses is able to add to the tally. Now, whether this was by divine ordinance or whatnot, I'm not prepared to speak on that yet this morning, but we can certainly look into that when we talk about that next week. All right? Thanks for stumping the teacher this morning, Jim. Appreciate that. Mike, go ahead.
I've heard the story about Joshua and Caleb to be a positive thinking, just simply having a positive attitude.
Yeah.
You know, it's important to have a positive attitude, but this was based on facts and
Sure.
promises and trusting in God.
Sure.
But I've heard studies on, just their attitude was so
Yeah.
good that it was based on facts and truth.
It is.
Promises.
Well, what did God said there in chapter 15? These 10 times you have doubted me. Well, not everybody doubted him, thank goodness, and here are two that did not doubt him for 10 times. Here's Joshua and Caleb. Yes, they had a positive attitude, and yes, it's generally good to have a positive attitude, but they had a little bit more than a positive attitude going here. Good point. All right, let's get into Joshua chapter 3, if you would. Joshua chapter 3. So God has called Joshua to be the next leader. You are going to take the people, you're going to lead them into the promised land. In Joshua 3, Israel is going to cross the Red Sea or the Jordan River barrier, rather. And they're going to begin in earnest the conquest of this land which God had promised to the people. And had promised all the way back to Abraham. You have something interesting that's going to happen here in chapters 3 and 4. Leaders listen, and leaders observe, and leaders plan for the future. And you see all of this really demonstrated in the life of Joshua. We're crossing over the Red Sea. This is an amazing moment for Israel. This is something that needs to be memorialized. This is something that needs to be remembered. This is something that needs to be marked. So Joshua in chapter 3 and verse 6, capítulo 3, verso 6, Joshua says to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant, cross over ahead of the people. And so the priests took up the Ark of the Covenant, they went ahead of the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that just as I have been with Moses, so I will be with you as well. You shall moreover command the priests who are carrying the Ark of the Covenant, saying, when you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. Then Joshua said to the sons of Israel, come here, and hear the words of the Lord your God. By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will assuredly dispossess from before you the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Hivite, the Perizzite, the Girgashite, the Amorite, and the Jebusite. And so we're going to take the ark in front, but come to verse 12. Now then, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And it shall come about, when the soles of the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan will be cut off, and the waters which are flowing down from above will stand in one heap. So when the people set out from their tents to cross the Jordan with the priests carrying the ark of the covenant before the people, and when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, and the feet of the priests carrying the ark were dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows its banks during the harvest, the waters which were flowing down from above stood and rose up in one heap, a great distance away at Adam, the city which is beside Zarethan. And so the waters were completely cut off. Verse 17, the priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground until all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan. This is eerily similar to what? To the Red Sea crossing, right? And this is a way of demonstrating what God had said. Just like I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. And perhaps one of the best ways to demonstrate that to the people is to do something similar with Joshua that happened with Moses. It was the Red Sea with Moses. Here with Joshua, it's the Jordan River. Now when all the nation, this is chapter 4 and verse 1, when all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one from each tribe. Command them, saying, take up for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet are standing. Carry them over with you, lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight. So they gather these 12 stones out of the midst of the river. And they take them to the camp where they're camping that night. And then verse 6, let this be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, saying, what do these stones mean? Then you shall say to them, because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord when it crossed the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. And so the sons of Israel did as Joshua had here commanded. And so they take these stones and they set them up as a sort of memorial. Here is Joshua working along with the Lord to do this. What's the purpose in doing this? Why take these stones out of the middle of the Jordan? Bring them with you. What's a leader doing here? Go ahead, Bruce.
Just reminding them of their father, of the sins that their father had committed, and just telling them, reminding them that not to go back to do the sins of their father.
Very good. Look at chapter 4 and verse 9 as well. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan at the place where the feet of the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant were standing, and they are there to this day. You have the one memorial that God had commanded Joshua, and that's the stones that were taken out of the midst of the Jordan and brought into the camp. But then you have this one as well, that Joshua sets up on his own. He sets them up where? Where the priest stood. And where were the priests standing? Middle of the Jordan, right? So here is Joshua giving this memorial to the people as well, something with which to remember what the Lord had done. What do good leaders do? Nothing? Just kind of sit there? No, what is Joshua doing here? Why put these stones in the middle of the river? What are we reminding them about?
How God did
The miracle that God has done, what God has done, how God has been with his people. And is there some imagery here? Here's water rushing and flowing, and these are surrounded on all sides, but what is standing? This memorial, not to Israel, but this memorial to whom? To God, who takes care of us in the storm. And there's your message that the leader provides. Go ahead, Lynn.
They crossed opposite Jericho.
Yes.
If you look on your map, Jericho's located on the river. I don't know, I've been told it's within eye distance. So imagine yourself in Jericho seeing this happen.
Yeah.
You probably have heard of these people
They sure
and
have.
their history and its effect on them.
There's a reason when we come over here to chapter 6 and verse 1, capítulo 6, verso 1, what's the first thing we learn about Jericho in chapter 6 and verse 1?
They'd shut it up.
It is shut up securely, right? And if you're shut up securely, then what? No one's going in, no one's coming out. Why do you do that? Why do you shut the gates in a walled city?
Because the enemy's inside.
Because the enemy's inside. Lynn, I think you're absolutely right. I think they have seen this sight, and they're trying to sort through what all's going on here, so they have shut up the city securely. And that takes us then to chapter 6. This is perhaps the most notable story out of the book of Joshua. You've got this fortress city of Jericho, and how is Jericho going to fall to the Israelites? Now there's not just one simple answer here. So if you're thinking of something, I don't know if that's what Tyler wants, just try it. How does Jericho fall to Israel here?
Following the orders of God.
Say it again, David.
By following the orders of God.
Okay, the walls fall by following the orders of God. I don't disagree with that. I think that's a good answer. Can you give me something else?
Fell outward.
It fell outward, okay, which is a strange way for it to fall. Anything else?
And it spared one random person. The people were obedient in doing what he said.
The people were obedient in doing what God said.
And it spared one random person's house because she helped them.
We're going to spare one person because she helped them.
Following the walls was complete. It was total destruction.
Total collapse. Okay. Lynn?
I think sometimes as Americans, we do not understand some of these walled cities.
Mm-hmm.
We know that people were living within these walls.
Yes.
I've seen walls as wide as this cooler, this room right here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the size of those walls were in Jericho, but they were sizable for people to be living within.
Sure.
For them to collapse, you know, you just talk about some thin wall.
We're not talking about a rock wall that surrounds a cemetery or something like that. We're talking about something that would have taken monumental effort to build. Were you going to say something, Travis?
Hebrews 11 said they fell by faith.
By faith. Okay, fell by faith. Can you give me another big concept word that plays into how these walls fell? What word often goes along with faith?
Obedience.
Who said it?
Grace.
Grace. Who knocks down these walls? What has Israel done to deserve God knocking down these walls? They haven't done a thing in the world. In fact, if we're going to talk about what Israel has done, what have they done 10 times? No, what have they done 10 times up to this point? Not walking around. What have they done 10 times? Doubted God, turned away from God. Do they deserve God knocking down these walls? But God does it anyway. What is that? That's grace. The walls fall by grace. The walls fall by faith. Faith that embraces action and obedience.
What David was saying about obedience and following God's commandments, this makes absolutely no sense that the walls would fall down because we march around it 6 times. But you do what God tells you to do. I mean, that's, the way that God, like in baptism, why, what is, it's a simple act of faith. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not like we're going to take the catapults and we're going to bomb the
Yeah.
side of the walls and it's going to fall down. I want you to march around for 6 times.
We're going to use the things that seem to make no sense, but are going to communicate something. What does what is being communicated to us? If God is knocking down these walls with horns and shouts and a stream of people walking around in silence until that last time, what is one thing he is communicating by knocking down the walls in that way?
It's not you.
It's not you. Who said that? Is that you, Haley? Good one. It's not you. This is, I'm doing this. And I'm doing this for whom? I'm doing this for you. But don't lose sight of the fact that it's me. It's reminding Israel who their trust and who their confidence is. It's going to be later in the story. What does God, for example, tell his kings of Israel not to multiply? Remember? 3 things. You don't multiply horses, and that's one we're going to talk about. What else do you not multiply? Bonus points. Chariots and horses go together, so you're right on that. What else? You don't multiply wives, and you don't multiply gold. Okay? You multiply gold, and you start to think all of this is mine. You multiply wives, and as you see throughout 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, you're marrying off, and that was how you solidified alliances and things like that. So the provision against not multiplying wives, at least in part, has to do with not making alliances and not multiplying chariots or horses. Why do you not multiply chariots or horses? Because you don't need them. Because if you have that many, you start to trust in them. And Israel's trust was not to be in horse or chariot or spear or sword, but Israel's trust was to be in whom? In God. God who could deliver in a variety of ways, including, later in the book of Joshua, sending hornets. Just a mass of hornets to clear people out, right? Ryan.
I was thinking about the shadow of things to come.
Yeah?
You know, they leave the bondage of sin, Egypt, passing through the water into freedom. And that crushing of the Egyptian forces was crushing their power over God's people. And then we cross through the water again when we pass into the promise of God. And reminding us all along the way, as you said.
Some beautiful visuals going on here, aren't there? And we certainly see these threads being tied into what we see later in the New Testament. Good point, Ryan. Bruce.
I think he's also pointing out that it's always been God as well. God has always been the one who's protected them. It's not just in this one particular instance.
Right.
When they complained about not having food, what did God do for them?
Exactly.
When they complained about not having water, what did God do for them? Through the 10 plague, he protected them. It's a continuous cycle.
Good point. And that reminds me, I need to make an apology for last week. I conflated 2 different Bible stories. I'm sure all of you caught this. I conflated 2 different Bible stories last week. When God sends the manna and sends the quail in Moses' day, it's not back in Exodus where he sends quail up to their nostrils. That comes later. But I talked about it like it was from Exodus, and I'm sorry about that. I had to go back and read that, and I got that wrong in class. So you're all looking at me like, what are you talking about, Todd? You don't, quail up to the nostrils? No? Okay. Well, anyway, it happened later. It's not in Exodus, and that was my fault. I got that one out of order there. All right. Jericho, we're successful at Jericho, which makes the very next chapter, chapter 7, all the more upsetting because we come up against the little city-state of Ai, or Ai. But if I call it Ai, that's going to really just trigger some people, so we'll call it Ai. Okay? And we come up to Ai, and Israel says, look, they're small, we can take them, and we can take them with a quarter of our forces. So they go up, they go to fight against Ai, and what happens? They lose. Now this is the people of God that don't lose, right? This is God is with you. Be strong and take courage. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go, except when you go to Ai, apparently. Why do they lose at Ai? Okay, and this ties back in to what the instructions of God were in chapter 6 when you come against Jericho. What were you not supposed to do when you went in and took Jericho? You were not supposed to take of their things and put it among your own stuff. But what had Achan done? He had done just that. And so in Joshua chapter 7, after Israel falls, Joshua realizes what give him all the credit in the world. What does Joshua realize? Something's wrong, and the something that is wrong is It's something with us. And so what's the first thing a good leader does?
He investigates.
He's going to pray to God, isn't he?
Praise to God.
He's going to come down here, he's going to pray to God. He's going to confess, he's going to seek God's wisdom. And we find out that there's sin in the camp, and so we're going to go and investigate. And the lot eventually falls to Achan and his family. Achan's going to admit to what he has done. He is going to be stoned, along with his family. And sometimes people say, well, isn't that kind of cruel that Achan's family gets killed along with him? And I suppose if we're thinking of things in our Western mindset, that might make sense. But think about the nature of your dwelling at this time. Are you dwelling in a split level that's spread on 1,800 square feet? What are you living in?
One tent.
You're living in a tent. Everybody's living where? Together in the tent, the same room. Are you hiding anything from anybody in a tent? What does, and then this is the implication of the text, what does his whole family know?
They are complicit.
They know what's gone on. They're complicit in it. And have they done anything to try to remedy this? No. And so that's why Achan and his family are going to be stoned. And of course, after that happens in chapter 8, they're going to go in and they're going to take Ai. The problem was, God was not with the people while there was sin amongst them. But once the sin was dealt with, God's fellowship was regained by the people. Go
I
ahead,
was
Lynn.
going to comment, verse 11 says, God speaking, they had stolen and deceived. Deceived is my point.
Yes. Very good. Yes, they have both stolen and deceived. Very good. Yes, sir. All right, so, into the book of Joshua. Joshua is about to die after having led the people into the land of Canaan. And we get two different farewell addresses from Joshua, chapter 23 and chapter 24. One of these farewell addresses is given to the leaders of the people of Israel, the elders of the children of Israel. And then one of these is given to the nation at large, one in which everyone hears. And of course, the famous quote that you might know, that you might have cross-stitched on a pillow or on a magnet on your fridge, is what from Joshua 24? As for me and for my house, we will serve the Lord. That's right. He reminds here in this farewell address, reminds the leaders of the nation to maintain their faithfulness towards God, to lead Israel in a godly manner. And then he speaks to the nation and reminds them that God has fulfilled his promises and that they need to follow him. So let's get to our questions here real quick. Number one, why was Joshua allowed to enter Canaan even though he was advanced in age?
Because of his faith.
Because of his faithfulness, right? He and Caleb were the good spies that brought back the good report. What does the name Joshua mean?
Save of God.
Salvation.
Saving God or salvation, that's right, both of those. List two difficult situations Joshua had to deal with when he led Israel. The walls of Jericho, okay, coming up against a massive walled city, okay. What else? Who's over here talking to me? Mike? AI? Anyone over here who said something over here? Anybody? No? Not brave enough to repeat it? Okay.
Yeah, to pass over Jordan.
Yes, crossing of the Jordan. The Gibeonites, is that what you said? Doug, coming in. Look at you coming in with the Gibeonites. I'm impressed. I actually have that on mine, Doug, from Joshua chapter 9. Very good. Hey, I'm proud of you, Doug. You did good, buddy. Your favorite Bible class question ever when you were 6 or 7 years old? Who was Joshua's father? None. And we all laugh. That nobody does. Okay. Mine. Into which tribe was Joshua born? Ephraim. Very good. Tribe of Ephraim. All right. Thought questions I wanted to get here this morning. You tell me, what characteristics made Joshua a good leader? He served. Oh, that's deep, Doug. If you're going to be a good leader, you got to be a good what?
Servant.
Got to be a good servant. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. Lynn?
I would say he feared God. And one of the things that's in my mind, when Moses went on the mountain, he took him.
Sure did.
And when they came down and they built the calf, he went in Moses' tent, and he was scared to go away. An example of fear. I mean, he knew God was in charge. I think that's clear when you look at his life.
You want to be a good leader, you got to fear God. Fearing God goes a long way towards being a good leader. Good point, man. What else?
You stay faithful and remind the people to be.
Do you realize you and Doug both just said faithful literally at the same time? Good job. He was faithful to God and faithful in his service to the people. Is that what you said?
And encourage the people to be faithful.
Encourage the people to be faithful. Very good.
One of the problems he had was a continuing idolatry amongst the people.
Uh-huh.
Because in 24:23, after they said,
Yeah.
we will follow God, he says, put away the strange gods which are among you and incline your heart unto the Lord.
He is struggling with an obstinate people. Good leaders can be leading people who have struggles.
Yep.
And just because people are having struggles doesn't necessarily reflect upon the leadership of the one who is leading them. Lynn, and then up here to you, John.
Well, the only thing I'd add to that is he obviously knew it.
Yeah,
You have to know your sheep.
sure. He knows, but give him credit. What's he trying to do here? He knows about it in what?
Tries to fix it.
Leaders are not ostriches.
No.
What does the ostrich do?
Hides it.
Puts his head in the sand. The leader hears about the issue, and the leader does what?
Takes action to
He
correct
tries to address it. John.
It always gives me encouragement to know that leaders aren't perfect. You mentioned the Gibeonites earlier, and Joshua forgot to ask God first. And so a characteristic of his life that he always seemed to have, putting God first, asking God first, serving God first, he forgot to do with the Gibeonites, and it got him into trouble, which reminds us that any of us can stumble and forget what we know is right.
We're not looking, when we're trying to find leaders, I'm thinking, for example, when a local church is seeking out shepherds, we're not looking for someone who is morally perfect, who has never sinned before. Indeed, that's not the qualification. We're looking for people who are blameless. We're looking for people who are faithful. And part of being faithful is, when I realize I've done wrong, I come back to God and fix it in the way that he specifies.
And it makes me nervous if I hear a leader who you can never imagine saying, I was wrong, because you are going to make mistakes.
Sure. Good
And
point.
that's part of being good leaders, knowing that and correcting it.
Absolutely. Lynn, yes, sir.
Not a characteristic, but he had a great teacher.
He had a good teacher, right? If we want to develop good leaders, what do we need to do? Train them. We need to train them. We need to provide opportunities to raise up leaders. And that's what you see God doing with Moses and with Joshua. I put Numbers chapter 14, he knew when to stand. Sometimes you got to take a stand. Joshua did that in chapter 14. He knew when to fall. In Joshua chapter 7, he falls on his knees and he prays to God. Good leaders know when to stand. Good leaders know when to fall. And there's a time to do both. Why does Joshua tell the Israelites in chapter 24 and verse 19 that they could not serve the Lord? Right? We don't have that one cross-stitched on our pillows very often, right? As for me and for my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua encourages them to do the same, and they shout back and say, yes, that's what we're going to do. But in verse 19, then Joshua replies to them and says, you will not be able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. Why in the world would you say that, Joshua?
They were starting to fall back into serving the gods
Right.
there.
We're starting to fall back into where we were. Connie, what were you saying?
Same thing, and they were serving idols.
Yeah, he's saying this to a people who, at the same time they're saying we're going to serve God, still have their household idols and everything like that,
You gotta
right?
read verse 20.
And read it, Danica.
If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and do you harm and consume you, after having done you good.
All right, so the problem is sometimes just plucking a verse out of context and making it sound like whatever we want. Right. Look at verse 15 of chapter 24. Joshua's point in verse 19 is not that they're wholly incapable of serving God. Joshua's point is that they could not serve God with a divided heart, which is what verse 20 makes clear. But read with me here, verse 15. If it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are now living. But as for me and for my house, we will serve the Lord. You've got these options before you, and he says, choose. The people had the ability to choose, right? Verse 19 is not saying they didn't. It's just simply saying you can't serve the Lord with a divided heart.
Reminiscent of what Moses told the people, I bring before you blessings and cursings.
That's right. Death, see, I've set before you blessing and cursing, death and life. Choose life. Good point. David, you're about to ring the bell, aren't you? Oh, I got 3 minutes? Well, great. Look at verses 3 and 4, chapters, verses, question 3 and 4. Okay, we'll get this real quick. Somebody over here, go back to Genesis chapter 15. And the rest of us are going to listen to one of you read it. Genesis chapter 15 and verse 18. Here was God's promise to Abraham concerning the land. In Genesis chapter 15, we're going to look at verses 18, 19, and 20.
On the day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenite and the Kenizzite and the Catamite.
Don't worry about all the names. We're good.
Okay.
But you've read what I wanted you to read. You got the point there. I'm giving this land to whom?
Your descendants.
To your descendants. And from the river in Egypt, that's generally going to be what?
The Nile.
The Nile. To the great river, that is the river Euphrates. I'm giving this land to your descendants, Abraham. So look at Joshua 21. Joshua 21 and verse 43. Joshua 21, verse 43. So the Lord gave Israel all the land which he had sworn to give to their fathers. That's what we just read back in Genesis 15, right? And they possessed it and lived in it. And the Lord gave them rest on every side according to all that he had sworn to their fathers. And no one of all their enemies stood before them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hand. Not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. All of them came to pass. In chapter 24, and as you look at verse 3, you're going to have the same thing referenced by Joshua as he gives this general address. You crossed the Jordan, this is chapter 24 and verse 11. You crossed the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the citizens of Jericho fought against you. And the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Canaanite, Hittite, Girgashite, Hivite, Jebusite. Thus I gave them into your hand. I sent the hornet before you against the Amorites. I gave you land, verse 13, on which you had not labored, cities which you had not built, and you have lived in them. Did God fulfill the promise that had been made to Abraham?
Yes.
So the land promise was what? Fulfilled. Keep that in mind. Tuck that away. We're going to come back to that as we go through this study. But so far, we've seen two promises to Abraham fulfilled. What does he have? He has this nation, and what other promise has now been fulfilled? The land promise. All right, that's good. Appreciate your attendance and your comments this morning.